In this video, we're going to set up our switches with the VLANs that we came up with in our last video. So in our last video, we laid out the different VLANs we want for our network based off of some fictitious business that we were creating this for. So now it's time to apply it to our setup. Our setup is 3 switches and a few Pis and a laptop and router. So let's get started in how do we configure these VLANs on these devices. So this is an example of our network that we have. We have here the 3 switches that we have, the 3 Pis. We're gonna put each one of those Pis on a different network. So the first one's gonna be on a management network, the second one is gonna be on a server network, and the third one is gonna be on the execs network. So VLAN 10, 20, and 30. So that way we can do some testing with this and figure out how this traffic is being sent from one location to the next. And then we have some other VLANs that we're going to create, but we're not necessarily going to use that right away. So let's jump onto our demo laptop and start taking a look at what this looks like from a configuration standpoint. So there's actually quite a few different settings, different things that we need to change with this. So the first thing that I did is I recorded everything in my notes here. I came up with the VLANs and I attached the VLANs with their assigned IP address ranges or their assigned network addresses here. So I've got that. And then I also went through and made sure I had record of what the new switches are going to be, what IP addresses are going to be associated with that. Changed the demo Pi, changed the layout of this whole thing just a little bit, but the demo Pi 1, demo Pi 2, demo Pi 3, and the different VLANs they're going to be associated with. The laptop, I moved that in here and changed the IP address to it. And then I also included the IP version 6 address ranges. So now I've got everything documented out. The next thing is because there's quite a few changes, I outlined the process that I'm going to take. And I actually ended up breaking it into 2 sections. This is all going to be one video, but I realized the management interfaces, because it's going to be changing my laptop and I'm going to lose some connectivity during the changeover, that I need to make sure that that's done in a rolled out in a very precise manner to make my job easier as I roll this out. So we're just going to start out in this video just by creating some VLANs. So the first thing that I'm going to do is take a backup copy of the configs. In fact, I've actually already done that. I used my method, which I talked about in another video, to go through to each one of the switches and grab a backup of the config. So now if something goes really wrong, I at least have that to fall back on. So I grabbed the copy of those. And then the next thing that we'll do is add the VLANs, and that's pretty safe. That's not going to really cause too much problems. While I have access to the Pis, I'm going to go through and change the IP addresses to those Pis. And then finally, after I do that, I'm going to go back and change the port assignments. I'm going to assign the ports to the specific VLANs, and that's where I'm going to lose connectivity to some of these items. So let's get jumping into this and start configuring it. As I've done before, I have all my changes laid out here in a document. These are going to be what I apply. And this gives one extra set of documentation later on in case I ever need to go back and reference what it is that I did. So the first change on here is actually just going through each of the switches and adding the VLAN. So that's pretty straightforward. So I'm going into the global configuration, and then with each one of these VLAN IDs, I'm adding a name. So all I need to do with this is just copy this. So I'm going to copy this and go onto each of the switches. I've already pulled up the switches, so I'm just going to be in here and I can click enter and or right click to paste that into there, and I can go switch by switch to get it all in here. And I'll do that. And once again, this is fairly low impact at this point in time because all I'm doing is creating those VLANs. The next thing that I need to do is adjust the pies. And so what I'm going to do is bring up each of the pies, and I'm going to now configure those pies to have the new IP address range. So while I'm in the Pi, I'm in the demo Pi 1 here, I need to go I type in the command sudo nano /etc/dhcpcd.conf. And so I'm going to go into this, and I did do a video about how you assign a static IP address in the past. So this, if you watched all my videos, this shouldn't be new information really. So, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to come in and edit these so that way it has the correct IP addresses here, and the new router is going to be 10.1.10.1. So because I don't have that created yet, I don't have the router set up, this is where I'm going to lose connectivity on that network when it's not going to be when I save it, it's actually going to be when I do a reload of this. So I'm going to save this out on this Pi, and then going to do a reboot on the Pi, and then I'm going to do the same thing for the Pi 2 and the Pi 3, and then I'll have all my Pi static IP addresses changed to the new one. And notice I've changed both the IP version 4 and the IP version 6 addresses. The next step that I want to do is I want to start configuring the interfaces to be a part of those different VLANs that we created. So I'm actually going to start on the farthest switch and then work my way towards the demo laptop. So I'm on the demo laptop. I'm going to remote into, well, I'm already remoted into switch 3, going to make the changes on there because it's the far distance one. And then I'm going to remote into switch 2, make the changes on there, or excuse me, switch 1, and then switch 2. That way, if I get disconnected because I entered in something wrong or it had some sort of unintended, I've cut the connectivity, I still can get to the other switches and still manage the other switches. So I'm going to start with S3 and then work my way to S1 and then S2. So let's jump on switch 3. I got the configs over here. The first one, I'm just going to do a range here. It's going to be a lot easier for me to do the range. So I'm going to do everything from FA01 through 20. I'm going to do that switch port mode access, switch port access VLAN 5. So that was my null port. So that way, if anything connects into it, it's not going to be able to connect and do anything. I put a description in there that it's null access port. So there's not going to be access. And I'm kind of doubling up. I'm also shutting the port down. So I'm doing a few things with this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this and I'm going to paste it in. So I'll copy that and paste it in here. And there, I made that configuration change. And then for interface FA021, 22, and 23, I'm assigning them to different VLANs, 10, 20, and 30. And those are to those Pis respectively. So I am going to put those into my switch 3 and have that all programmed in there. And then I've got the range from 24 to 46, same thing. I'm just going to shut down those ports. So, and in fact, I'm going to do it also for my Giga Ethernet ports since I'm not using those. So I'm going to, the only thing that I haven't really touched with this is my connections between the switches. I've not touched those yet. All right, so the next set of instructions are for switch 1. So I need to jump onto switch 1. I'm going to double check to make sure that I am on the right switch that I want to be on. I will copy and paste these. All I'm doing here, pretty much most of the ports on switch 1 are not supposed to be utilized, at least for my purposes right now. So I'm pretty much shutting everything down with the exception of those connections between the switch 1 and switch 2 and switch 1 and switch 3. So I'm going to copy those. I'll paste them into here. Oops, I did not do something right there. So let me, let's see, interface range. Oh, you know what? This is, sorry, this is a 3750, so it doesn't know what those mean. So hopefully this will be a little more accurate. So I'm going to copy that. I'll get in here, paste it, and there, looks like they're going in successfully now. So, all right, then I get to switch. This is supposed to be switch 2, and same thing, 1 through 20, I'm going to shut down. I am going to have the same configuration that I had for switch 3 in case I want to move some of these Pis around. Then I could just plug them in and have them working. I wouldn't do that on a typical network, but for this network, I'm going to do this for troubleshooting purposes, and so I can do some configurations of that. One thing to note too is I'm shutting all the extra ports down. I don't always do that, not on every single network that I've had. It just depends on the network and how sensitive that needs to be and how many people can come in and plug into it. So then I'll just kind of vary it depending on that. So now I'm in here, I did the same thing here. So I just need to go through and no, that's not what it is. So what is it telling me? Interface FA 023. So I've got, I'm still on switch 1. That's why I am trying to do switch 2 at this point in time. So switch 2, I'm going to grab these configurations here. And here again, I'm closing down some ports, and I skipped port 34 for now. I'm going to just copy all of this, paste it in here, and there we go. Now it's all in there. The last thing that I would do with this is a little troubleshooting to make sure that I can get to all of the devices, make sure that I configured those Pis correctly. But the problem is we don't have routing turned on yet. And so these are on different networks. In fact, at some point, that's the testing we'll do, is to make sure that we don't have access to those Pis. We shouldn't at this point because they're 2 different networks, and there's no way to get between those networks right now because we don't have routing turned on. So the last thing that I would do is, provided that everything was working correctly, I would just do the copy run start to save all the configuration of these devices. And then we would be done making these changes and implementing VLANs. So you can see that from a switch perspective, implementing these VLANs can be actually pretty simplistic. And so VLANs are really cool, very common. You have them a lot on your enterprise networks, and just definitely something you should be familiar with and not